final minute. Bennett for the pocket. Launch it to the edge. Touchdown. A.D. Mitchell.
Chase McGrath for the win for the Volunteers. From 40. On the way, knuckleball. He got it.
And welcome in. This is Bash's College Football Show. I am Colin Bashnagel, your host here. Bash's CFB Show on TikTok's where you can find me. And guys, like, personal thing here, I don't want to make a big deal about it. But I was really busy this weekend, and that's why I was a lot less active on TikTok. First off, I went to the Ohio State game. That was part of my busy weekend. Friday night, got engaged. That's all the detail I'm going to give you. But very, very busy weekend when it comes to that. Very happy weekend, but I do not get paid a dime for this, which means that life sometimes has moments that take priority. I still didn't miss any YouTube videos, and I don't have the graphics, not because I didn't have time to work on it, but rather I more so worked on the notes and parts of stuff because of the fact that I felt like there was a lot of games that I didn't have as a part of this week's discussion that need to be discussed. There's a ton of games that we need to run down. So we're going to have like three different videos come out here. And I told you guys, if you guys go over to Twitch, I will be talking about comments. We got Balo. Dan Enos is gone. My season is complete. Yeah, that was big news, and thank you for the congratulations. For those of you that don't know, when I was back playing NCAA 14, and by the way, that content will return this summer, hopefully, with the new NCAA game, especially on Twitch. Balo was one of the OGs. 100%. It's nice seeing you, Balo. Nice seeing you come back here. But yeah, life changing for me and life changing for Arkansas with Dan Enos getting fired after that 7-3. Can you believe one of my locks was Arkansas over in points? Now, I could talk about Walk That Line. The record's not great. We'll talk about Walk That Line's record later in the week when I do the preview. The record this week wasn't great. And again, mine to other places, I'm going to kind of give myself a little bit of a pass considering how hot I was the week before with a 9-3 record. So, I want to remind you guys on YouTube, comment, like, and subscribe because guess what? Opinion plus discussion equals community. And what we are trying to do is build a college football community. So let's get straight into it. He doesn't even want to speak about Arkansas today. All right. So we're going to start with the game of the day and the game that I was at. Ohio State suffocates Penn State. Their defense absolutely dominates that ball game right there. Now, let's start with this. Penn State's offense is not very good, and they also didn't lean on the part of their offense that is really good, which is the run game led by Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. But that offensive line got abused all day. Pressure was in Drew Aller's face the entire time, even when they were trying to get the quick game going. Keandre Lambert-Smith was the leading receiver, I believe, with 6 receptions for 52 yards. You also had Theo Johnson and Tyler Warren get involved a little bit. And in the throw game, I feel like Tyler Warren and Theo Johnson are probably their best weapons because Malik McClain, no-show. Harrison Wallace, pretty much a no-show in this game. And you basically had Keandre Lambert-Smith doing it by himself from a wideout perspective, and that's pretty tough. And also, shout out to Jermaine Matthews, the true freshman who was replacing Ohio State's number 1 corner, which was obviously Denzel Burke, who was out for this game. And so was Emeka Egbuka, and so was Travion Henderson. And that's why it's pretty impressive what Ohio State was able to do in this game. Their offense did not wow anybody outside of number 18, did not wow anybody, and that's for sure. And this offense is going to probably have to play better to be able to win the national championship. But the good thing is they still have time, and they got another big confident win. And the biggest thing about it, too, is these games against Penn State and Notre Dame are games that people said Ohio State could not win the last couple of years. And people who said that, by the way, they were correct. They won essentially 1 in 2 years, or really 3 years. If you go back to 2020, one game in like 3 years that was like that, a defensive slugfest, and that was the beginning of the season. Notre Dame last year, whose offense, by the way, could not move the ball against anybody early on in the season. Reminder, they lost to Marshall the very next game. They also lost to a Stanford team early in the season last year that was pretty dreadful. This Ohio State team, their defense is built different. They are almost, if not just as good as that 2019 squad. They're certainly, I feel like, more experienced. I don't feel that way. They are that way. They are more experienced than that 2019 team that went to the Fiesta Bowl and went really far. So I'm going to tell you guys this right now. This Ohio State team, they are probably the most dangerous team in the country and the most threatening to win a national championship. But they still have that game at the end of the year that they are not ready for. And I am not here to, I'm going to talk about this in a separate video with the Michigan Wolverines, but they are not there. Ohio State, not there to be able to beat Michigan at this moment in time. There's not a point in that game against Penn State where I'm like, this team is going to go into Ann Arbor and win that game. I didn't come out of that game thinking that way, but I came out of that game thinking that this team has the blueprint to keep that game competitive. And if that offense improves and it's just as good, if not better than Michigan's offense, that difference of number 18, just like it was the difference on Saturday, number 18, Marvin Harrison Jr., that could do it, especially when you add in Emeka Egbuka, especially when you value Cade Stover as well. This offensive line gets better. And this quarterback, who, again, did not look good in the first half. Second half looked better, but did not look good. He looked very pedestrian in the first half. If that quarterback gets better, this Ohio State team is probably the most dangerous team in college football, based on talent and based on everything that you have. So he's taking Michigan, and Tyler, my buddy Tyler there, Balo over here, taking Michigan over my Buckeyes. And like I said, for the video, this is going to be trimmed down and edited for the YouTube video. I'm going to feature the Twitch comments into the YouTube video. It's going to be a very raw cut. It always will be that way, at least for the rest of this season. Moving on, Alabama rallies against Tennessee in a massive comeback victory. I mean, they fell down pretty early in this game, 13-0. Joe Milton played probably the best half of his career, and then Tennessee's offense completely shut it down. If you look at how this game ended up playing out in total, the Alabama Crimson Tide ended up finding that point in their big play offense in the second half that everybody kind of has known, or at least anybody following Alabama really closely the last few weeks has known they have the capability of doing. They're not a team that's efficiently going to drive down the field, but they got such home run ability, and it demonstrated on the first drive of the second half. Alabama, 2 plays. They scored a touchdown off of 2 big plays, a big run by Jace McClellan and then a big pass to Isaiah Bond. That's how that game worked out. That's how that ended up being the summary of the game and the summary of the second half, really. If you take a look at what Alabama was able to do from a scoring perspective after they fell down 13-0, it was an explosive play by Isaiah Bond. It was an explosive defensive play by Jahad Campbell to get that scoop and score. And then explosive plays mixed in there to be able to, pull it all together when it comes to it. If you look at Alabama's touchdown drives here, their first touchdown drive was 9 plays, 59 yards. A little bit more sustained, right? But they had big old chunk plays in there. They had a 22-yard pass. They had a 10-yard run in there. A 10-plus yard run is an explosive play. A 20-plus yard, or explosive, I shouldn't say explosive, big play, chunk play, and then a 20-yard pass. That's a pretty big deal. If you look at the second half, like I mentioned, they had a 29-yard run and a 46-yard pass to lead to that touchdown. If you look at even the field goal, right, you had a 15-yard pass to Dupree, the tight end, that started out that drive, and you had Isaiah Bond getting loose for a 20-yard pickup. You look at the other touchdown drive, a 22-yard pickup to Jermaine Burton through the air, also a 13-yard run for Jalen Milroe. So big plays are a huge part of this Alabama offense. And if you can limit the big plays, I think you have Alabama beat. But the problem in this game was you had too many of these 10-plus yard runs. You had too many of these 20-plus yard passes, and then you had the defensive touchdown. Alabama, off of that, was able to dominate and win in the second half alone after they struggled in the start of this game because Tennessee was the aggressor. Props to Alabama, Tennessee. This one has to sting for you guys. And Baylor's reaction to this, thank the Lord. Alabama won. I don't think I can survive one more year of flexing from the Vol fans. 100% too. But the Vol fans got humbled against Georgia last year. They got humbled against Florida this year. They were less loud, and now they're loud about refs. So that's all I got to say about that. Utah defeats USC again. This time a walk-off field goal ends up getting the job done. So let's go back and talk about what happened last year. Cam Rising leads that team in a shootout at home, playing inspired ball for their fallen teammates. And they end up pulling out with a 2-point conversion late in that game to take the lead at, I believe, 43-42. And then Utah dominated in the Pac-12 championship because guess what? USC got completely manhandled and out physical. Well, manhandled and out physical is how it worked out again this year. 47 carries for 247 yards, and that adds up for 5.3 yards per carry. Bryson Barnes, very gutsy performance. He had a big run. I think it was a 26-yard run or something like that towards the end of the game. He had 10 carries for 57 yards. Jaquindon Jackson was the bell cow tailback who really broke out in that USC game last year, having 26 carries for $117. And then Sion Vaki, also looking really good, 9 carries for 68 yards, including a 24-yarder. You had big playability from Sion Vaki as well in the receiving game. That was a big deal. And then you had Davon Bailey, getting a couple of chunk plays like he normally does, and Money Parks as well, getting chunk plays. This offense for Utah is not good. So what happened? Alex Grinch, okay? We had talked about for basically a week, or at least the mainstream media talked about for basically a week, how USC didn't lose that game against Notre Dame because their defense let them down. It was the offense that let them down. But if you take a look at what this offense was able to do, this is ridiculous, by the way. You have a game that, and I get you were down by 2 scores, but you have a game that early on you were doing really well with balance, and then you went away from that balance. You threw the ball 35 times, you ran the ball 23 times, and that includes sacks, by the way. So I'm not even taking away sacks when I'm factoring that in. So you probably dropped back, for the most part, a total of about 39 times and ran the ball about 19 times with your snaps. You ran the ball with Marshawn Lloyd 7 times. He had 12 yards per carry on those 7 runs. He had a 45-yard touchdown run, by the way. And he fumbled the ball once, and he ended up going to the doghouse just for you to underutilize Austin Jones. So you're underutilizing these 2 running backs who have been really good and overutilizing a wide receiver room that is just overrated and has been from the beginning. I gotta be it. Like, I really like the freshman Zachariah Branch. His impact not necessarily felt in the offensive game plan, though, this year. Michael Jackson, a decent little player. Taj Washington, a decent little player. Lake McCree, a decent tight end. Dorian Singer, massive disappointment. Brandon Rice, massive disappointment. Mario Williams, not being utilized correctly, in my opinion, because they need the outside targets, and they're asking Mario Williams to play a ton of outside. And I don't know why Lincoln Riley is doing this. I think it's because he was focused on winning a second Heisman for Caleb instead of focusing on winning games. And their path to winning games is running the ball 30 times. 30 times a game between those 2 running backs, Austin Jones and Marshawn Lynch. And it's proven because they're able to have success on the ground. Like I said, one had 6 yards per carry. The other had 12 yards per carry on 7 carries and 5. You got to give them the ball. I don't know how else to put it. This was a ridiculous coaching performance by this entire coaching staff for USC, certainly Alex Grinch, and most importantly, Lincoln Riley. And guess what? For the 3rd time in a row, Kyle Whittingham and his staff completely outclassed and outcoached USC and their staff. And that's what happened in this game, and that's why that domination happened. Let's talk about top 10 teams struggle by talking about North Carolina losing to Virginia. And this is just a microcosm. This is just an example of what has happened in Mack Brown's tenure. North Carolina just does this. They don't necessarily have the home run talent. Tez Walker had another big day. Drake May played pretty well. It doesn't even matter, though, because this Virginia team was gritty, and that North Carolina defense got exposed to be more so what I thought it was in the preseason. And I knew this would happen. The week that I give North Carolina credit and give them the credit they deserve, they do this. They lose to a 1-5 Virginia team. They lose to a team that did not win an FBS game before that game. Pathetic. Like, we're in week that was what, their 7th game, and they hadn't won against an FBS opponent. They certainly haven't won against a Power 5 opponent. Props to Virginia for getting it done. Props to Tony Elliott for a massive, great game plan, but this was a huge disappointment for North Carolina. So they were the unlucky of the top 10, and they were number 10, so they're going to be out. But Florida State was tested. I think personally that game goes down to the wire if Riley Leonard's still in the game. Riley Leonard getting taken out completely stifled their entire offensive attack and gave momentum to Florida State and gave shorter fields to Florida State as well. I still think Florida State probably would have pulled it out, but Riley Leonard getting hurt absolutely killed them. You also had Texas, by the way. Texas struggling with Houston. You get up 21-0, and then you play it cute. You fake a field goal when you're up by, I think it was 14, 21-7. You fake a field goal, it backfires. They go down and score and make it a touchdown game before the half. This was a close game all throughout. How about UCF and Oklahoma having to hold off a 2-point conversion? I think UCF is a pretty decent team, but my gosh, man, what are we doing playing around with this? Okay. And Dylan Gabriel's former squad came to play in that one saying, hey, Dylan, thanks for leaving us. But Dylan ended up getting the win after all. And most especially, can we talk about number 2, Washington? I do want to talk about, as they're scrolling down here, we could talk about these scores. Michigan dominated Michigan State. Very good job by them. 49-0 right there. There's Oklahoma. We talked about them. There's Florida State. We talked about them. You go over to the number 8 team in my ranking. That was Oregon. They took care of business pretty well against Washington State. I still think Washington State's an undervalued team. As you can see, Virginia beating number 9 North Carolina, and then Houston giving Texas way too much of a game. But Washington was absolutely alarming. Not only was it alarming because maybe they had an off day, I think Arizona State might have just delivered the blueprint on how to slow down that Washington offense. And it's not that difficult. I got to tell you what you got to be able to do. You got to be able to jam and be able to stuff the wide receivers from getting separation early in their routes and send extra hats to get pressure on Michael Penix Jr. Because Michael Penix Jr. under pressure yesterday was not great. But overall, in the game, he just wasn't great. And I think you can attribute that to an off day. And I don't think too many teams are going to be able to count on Washington having an off day like that. But 0 offensive touchdowns. If you guys do not know what happened in this game, they scored 3 field goals, which would have been enough to win because their defense did play pretty well against a bad Arizona State offense, albeit. But Kenny Dillingham, a great offensive mind nonetheless. And then they scored a pick 6 that sealed up the game. It took that pick 6 to win the game. Washington, you got to play better than that. And you're going to see them affected. I have them ranked number 2. I've had them ranked number 2 for weeks too. This wasn't just an overreaction to Oregon. They're dropping quite significantly because Michigan has not had that type of performance. Ohio State has not had that type of performance. Florida State didn't even have that type of performance. You could say maybe Boston College. I'll give you that. I'm just, wow. I'm not sure about this Washington team anymore because for them to suddenly just look that bad on offense on a random week, that's rough right there. That's really rough. All right, we're going to do a rapid rundown and get the heck on out of here. We're going to start with early on in the week, and the biggest storyline I took from early on in the week is Jacksonville State gets their 6th win, upsetting Western Kentucky at home. They should be bowling. I don't really care what anybody has to say with that. We're going to fast forward to Thursday, skip that Wednesday slate. Who cares? I just don't want to spend the time. I could talk about it, but I want to get this video done within the about 24-minute on Twitch mark here. So James Madison was able to beat Marshall. There's a reason they're a top 25 team. They really dominated this game. They were up 20-2 for a pretty long time. Marshall scored a late touchdown to make it closer. Shout out to SMU dominating Temple on the road, 55-0 on a Friday night. You talk about what we didn't talk about, the Commander-in-Chief Trophy. Game 1 goes to Air Force, and it went in emphatic fashion. Let's keep in mind that even though it looked like a struggle, they were up 17-0. It was a late touchdown for Navy to make it a little bit closer. Air Force was by far the clear better team, but props to Navy for trying to cover. Air Force barely covers there. Mississippi State beat Arkansas 7-3. That was pathetic. The one touchdown, by the way, was a defensive touchdown. Yikes. Rutgers beating up on Indiana. They get bowl eligible, and Greg Schiano's, I don't even know how many years he's been there. I think 4 maybe. I think since 2019 he's been there. So this might be his 5th year. But they're going bowling, and, they have a really, really rough schedule down the stretch. In fact, they still have to play Penn State and Ohio State, but props to them. They have to play Ohio State at Iowa. Rutgers plays against Penn State on the road, and then they play Maryland to wrap things up. So they get a bye week before Ohio State. They're going to give Ohio State everything they can handle all at home, but hey, props to them for making a bowl game that even if they do lose out after the bye with that tough 4-game stretch, they're still going bowling. Shout out to Memphis and UAB for getting that over, by the way, to help walk that line for sure. And Baylor getting a big win on the road at Cincinnati was massive to see too. Missouri dominating South Carolina. This Missouri team is really good, and I warned you guys in the preseason. Now you guys got to listen to me. They're a 7-1 football team, guys. They're over for the season has already hit. And I said 9-3, and a lot of people gave me backlash. You're telling me that they only have to go 2-2 through their next 4 games? Man, props to me for calling that one. Tulane struggles to a victory against North Texas. North Texas is terrible. I don't know how Tulane struggled in this game, but North Texas is terrible. Iowa gets screwed over as Cooper DeJean had a totally phantom fair catch call. But the one thing I'll say about bad officiating in this game, at least it was against a really, really bad offense. Wisconsin was able to rally back against Illinois. I think they were down 21-7 in this game, rallied all the way back to win 25-21. Props to Luke Fickell's squad and getting up and coming back and winning to try to build momentum for that Ohio State game. If Ohio State falls asleep at the wheel, they're on upset alert next week. Just you watch out. Even though Wisconsin's not that great of a team, they got a pretty solid defense, a good run defense that can shut them down. And it's really going to come down to Kyle McCord yet again, just like basically every freaking game that Ohio State plays. Pardon me for that aggressiveness right there. Nebraska holds off Northwestern 17-9. Oklahoma State really on fire right now. They currently sit at 5-2 after that loss against South Alabama 33-7. They have really turned and flipped the switch and turned the season around. Props to them for being able to do that. UTSA dominating FAU on the road 36-10. Shout out to the Roadrunners for giving me that cover on Walk That Line. Ole Miss really not necessarily surviving. They were up multiple scores, but kind of scrapping out a win against Auburn on the road. Kansas State dominating TCU, by the way. I told you, like Kansas State, I locked up Kansas State. That was Walk That Line impact as well. I don't even know what my record was for Walk That Line now that I think about it. So I'll go through that here in a second, but big props to Kansas State for being able to do that. UNLV survives and wins on a last-second field goal against Colorado State, 25-23. Guess what? UNLV's bowling at 6-1. That's pretty awesome to see. LSU who took it to Army 62-0. They took them in behind the woodshed right there. Miami beating Clemson in overtime was one of the more entertaining finals of the weekend. The whole entire week, he was supposed to hand it off and decided to pull it and play hero ball kind of conversation on that last 4th down and goal. Was very interesting to hear Dabo Swinney throw his quarterback under the bus. And I don't really know what's going on at Clemson. All I do know is they're a 4-3 football team now after losing at Miami. But props to Miami for getting back off the mat after 2 really rough weeks in a row and losing your starting quarterback in the early stages of the game and going with Emory Williams the rest of the way. He played pretty well. Great job by the Miami Hurricanes. Georgia State with a massive win on the road at Louisiana first off, I just want to say Sean Elliott has definitely saved his job this season. They're a 6-1 football team. They are ahead in the Sun Belt East right now outside of James Madison. watch out for the Georgia State Panthers to potentially be a team that matches up with Troy or South Alabama out of the west of the Sun Belt. Nevada and San Diego State was a 6-0 football game that Nevada won. Disgusting. Absolutely gross. I wish I would have placed the Nevada money line there. But yeah, that was disgusting. Yeah. Like, this is how this squad in Nevada breaks their 16-game losing streak, is with the 6-0 win over Brady Hoke. I just can't, dude. UCLA taking it to Stanford after the week that they had. To put it in perspective for you Colorado bandwagon fans, and I'm not a Colorado hater whatsoever, Elick Manor went for 8 receptions and 90 yards, and a lot of that was garbage time. I'm just going to say this. Colorado, I hope you enjoyed your time at home and not being able to lose this week. So if I pull up what happened and walk that line before we get out of here, and this did go a little bit longer than I wanted, the walk that line here, Arkansas did not hit the over. My gosh, that was terrible. So 0-1. Memphis UAB, the over hit 1-1. Tennessee probably should have covered 9.5, but they didn't. 0-2 or 1-2, 1-3 after Tulane certainly didn't cover. 2-3 after Eastern Michigan covers. 3-3 after UTSA covers, and then I took the North Carolina over in points, and they did not cover. So 3-4. Kansas State makes me 4-4 with a -6.5 right there. Colorado State UNLV did not hit the over. That's 4-5. Nor did Georgia State and ULL. So that's 4-6, but I did go 5-6 with a Georgia State plus 3.5. I said play money line. They won outright in the Washington -27.5. You got to score over 27.5 to be able to win by more than 27.5. So thanks, Washington. 5-7 on the week. Not great. We are dead even at 500 on the year. At that point, if you add up the record, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it with the week that I had. Like I said, getting engaged. That's the detail I'm going to give you. Getting engaged. I'm pretty fine with it. So thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys at the next video where we release the content.